Learning and working with our unconscious habits on the road within, the path of rewiring the mind, the road to enlightenment, the gradual liberation of the inner child, whatever you want to call it. Looking at these unconscious habits, uncovering them, practicing awareness around them, shifting them is a big part of the work. And our habits are closely associated with neural pathways deeply ingrained in the brain, in the central nervous system. And our habits can manifest as thoughts, feelings, or actions. So it really just depends on the person and where the individual is at. What's the best approach to focus on the actions specifically, the thoughts, the feelings, all three? For me, in the beginning, it was actions. It was noting unconscious patterns of actions or lack of actions that were not a service to me or were not helping me and were a hindrance for me in my path. And I worked to shift those bit by bit. As I went down the road, I learned that there's also something to be said for feelings, working with the feelings in terms of the pattern of feelings. Because when we realize that these unconscious walls that were formed when we were kids come from a space of protection and that they are associated with the central nervous system and the feelings that we have. So when you have a feeling pop up to the surface due to some kind of event that happens on the outside, it's a pattern, and so the same as you can begin to work with acknowledging and shifting the direction of your patterns of actions, you can do the same thing with your feelings and certainly your thoughts. So for me, it was starting with actions and then thoughts and then feelings. That was the actual order for me. And I'm still continuing to do this work. So if you are someone who's new to the idea of rewiring your mind or new to the idea of the path within, this is an ongoing journey. One of the things to really take into heart from my perspective is there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that we need to fix. I think that from that same space, that unconscious space, there's a feeling or a proclivity for desire to fix something, that there's something wrong with us. And that's super common across the board for most people. But speaking to either your conscious mind or your unconscious mind, your inner child, there is nothing to fix. It's really about alignment. It's really about the alignment of our thoughts and our feelings and the processing of emotions. The processing of emotions that have been buried deep or constricted. Just like you think about a hose, if it's constricted and bent, the water's not going to flow. It's the same thing for us. There's so much nuance and different levels of how these feelings can be repressed and how they can show themselves. But our daily actions or lack of actions, our daily management of our habits with our thoughts, feelings, and actions is where we're going to find our ability to work with this to find real sustainable change that's actually going to help us live a more liberated life, get in touch with the deeper parts of ourselves, be healthier from the get-go, not on the get-go, from the get-go. So before I dive a little bit deeper into habits, I want to talk about a different perspective on habits, which is more like a macro perspective of habits, the unconscious driver of the habits or lack of habits, good habits or bad habits or whatever you want to call it. So many of us, because of conditioned thought, if that sounds crazy, listen to Alan Watts. He talks about it a lot. It's a good source of getting an understanding of it. But most of us are conditioned, programmed to be out here hustling to make our life happen and do these jobs and these businesses that for a lot of us, not everybody, but for a lot of us, it's more of like a soul-sucking thing. It's not really feeding us. It's not really giving us life. So you think about what kind of effect that has on your central nervous system, and it does have a big effect on it. It can be very easy to see how this version of someone can lean towards unconscious habits that are not helpful or do things that are in the category of self-sabotage. But generally speaking, from my perspective, someone who has more of a sense of purpose in what they're wanting to do or what they're working towards, some kind of a sense of mission, this person is more likely to pick up positive habits just because of that mind frame, just because of that mindset. It's bananas, but it's so true. And this may be too deep for some, but I was listening to a podcast recently and I heard this. I know for certain older versions of myself, this would be like, all right, man, what are you talking about? But I just feel compelled to share it because it really hit me in a way that I was like, yeah, man, that was so beautifully said. And so what he talked about is because we have been unconsciously conditioned, and this was not Alan Watts, it was another speaker, a podcast I was listening to, because we've been unconsciously conditioned to do what it takes to basically acquire the paycheck, we are losing sight of the bigger macro picture, right? And I'm paraphrasing the shit out of what this dude said. But basically he said that, so if you step behind that desire for the paycheck, there is the person, right? There's you. Whether you're somewhere in a successful career, you don't know what you're doing, whatever. Behind the desire for the paycheck is for you. It's for you, right? But what is behind you? I think he said like 3 P's or whatever, right? So paycheck, person, what's behind you? What's before your birth date? It's purpose, if you believe in anything divine. Doesn't have to be God, doesn't have to be universe, could be spaghetti monster, whatever, right? If you believe in the idea that you might have a purpose here, that there's purpose to life. And he said someone who thinks about their life beginning from their birth date, they're already missing it, right? In the chaos, there is order. If we get past man's opinion of things, then we can see the natural order in life. So if we get on board with the idea that there's purpose to life, more specifically, purpose to your life, and if there's any resistance to that, believe me, I get it. I could go down a road of how much resistance I used to have to anything in the realm of like spiritual thought or, anything woo-woo, purpose, X, Y, Z. I just thought it was always just shit people said to get likes, like hashtag gratitude. I would look at that like influencers, like, okay, they're just trying to get likes, So I used to have a massive resistance to all of this. So the general point here is, if we're on board with this idea, someone who feels that sense of purpose and mission, they're going to be more likely to take on good habits. One who doesn't is likely going to take on unconscious habits that don't serve them. Someone who wants to make that shift to where they are more purpose-driven, if they don't feel like they have that in their life, the more they deconstruct the older limiting beliefs, the more they see clearly, and the more they can align with something that is more purposeful. Now, I know I'm trying not to go down a tangent here, but from my perspective, purpose is something that evolves over time. Currently, I am a content creator / podcast host / coach / whatever, right? But in the future, I've been farting around with creating cartoons because I've always kind of wanted to do that. I might start putting my message into cartoons and do that for a few years. We've been conditioned to think that we have to have this one thing that we do our entire life, and we put so much unconscious value into one thing. I believe at a core, my purpose that is invaluable is that I'm here to serve other people, to help them find the liberation that I've found and continue to find. It's what lights me up. Like having a conversation about this stuff, I would do it even if I wasn't doing it for work. I would probably be the guy, if I worked at your office, I would always be trying to rope you into these kinds of conversations, right? So, but I didn't see this side of purpose. I didn't even know purpose. I didn't feel purpose when I first started beginning to go down the road of deconstructing my historically conditioned beliefs. So anyhow, that was a little bit more of a tangent that I wanted to do. If you are still with me, but you're not on board necessarily with the purpose part of it, I get it. It may come down the road. As far as habits are concerned, we can make positive shifts that will help us with our habits right now without having an idea of purpose. Whether that's there or not, we can make positive shifts that will change how we think about purpose down the road and whatever it is that we're doing potentially, because we're changing the root layers of how we've thought historically up to the point that we make the decision to change how we approach our life, essentially, how we live our life, how we feel in our life. For me, that's the most valuable thing. When I take moments of reflection in my life, just out and about, and I take note of how good I feel in a scenario that might have been mundane to a past version of myself where I would have felt constricted, and I just reflect and I think to myself, dude, that's why we keep talking about this shit. Fuck, man, that's valuable. So if all habits are deeply ingrained neural pathways, then if we just begin to practice awareness around when these situations happen and then redirect and go in a new direction in those moments, we are literally creating new neural pathways in a different direction that will become stronger than the preceding, and then the historical habit that's not favorable will fall away. Now, the best way to make shifts in habits is to do habit stacking. The book Atomic Habits talks about this, and the benefit there is you're creating a new neural pathway, a new habit, in addition to an existing neural network, an existing habit. If you get up in the morning and you come downstairs and the first thing you do is make some tea or make some coffee, whatever it is, and then the next thing you do is like pick up your phone and scroll for a little bit, then we can look at this from the observer perspective and say, okay, well, there's the existing habit metric going on here, or matrix going on here, but the core one is we're coming downstairs, we're getting our coffee, we're getting our tea. So let's, instead of going on the phone, let's go outside with our tea or coffee, and let's take a seat and look outside at the trees and the birds and take a moment to take a few deep breaths and just pay attention to nature and not think about anything that you have to do yet that day, because as soon as you do, it's going to evoke a little bit of that stress response and everything. And this is a process. Believe me, I know. For a lot of people, you can't just say, I'm going to stop thinking about it. But you begin to approach one particular habit each day until it shifts, and you make sure that you stick with it until it does. And then once it does, now we have room to add on another one. And the more that you do this, the better you get at it, or the easier it becomes to create new habits that serve you more better, that serve you more better. So there's plenty of areas of potential unconscious physical action habits that occur in anyone's given day that could be looked at and worked with. But I wanted to give one example in that category and then move forth to an example in the feeling category. Whenever an external situation happens, and we have this response that comes up, whether it's like feeling a little bit of fear or lack or scaredness or jealousy or anger or whatever, right? We have this emotional outburst that happens, or surfacing that happens from an external stimuli. So this is also a pattern, and if we catch this emergence of this pattern and we acknowledge and allow whatever is coming to the surface, as opposed to unconsciously trying to fight it, because most people are unconsciously trying to fight it or get away from it. But if we turn our awareness and we begin to, again, acknowledge and allow, be present with, allow it to process through, acknowledge that it is just a feeling and it will pass, right? And then also telling a new story that goes in a different direction than what is likely behind that fear. And so we can look at what a macro fear might be, so it could be, not feeling supported or something like that, right? So there's some kind of an external situation that happens, the emotion arises, the person does the pattern interrupt, and then they go to think about how they're going to frame a new thought for a new direction, and they think, well, what was behind that? Well, yeah, I mean, it's probably when I was a kid, I didn't feel supported or something like that. Okay, all right, well, I'm always supported. And I used to resist the fuck out of that one. It's easier for me to say now, because in the beginning, it's like, who the fuck is supporting me? But you work your way in there because you acknowledge that if nothing else, you are supported by gravity. You are supported by oxygen. There are things that are in your life that have been supporting you this entire time. If you're still breathing, man, the mechanisms that are within your body that are supporting you every second of the day. So you can look at it from a different way and reframe it. But the more you get on board with saying that, the more it has positive effects in all the areas that are deeper within you, right? And it helps to cultivate resilience and all the good things. So that's an example of feelings. And I have a principle recipe. I have like a formula, AARG, acknowledge, allow, redirect, gratitude. I'm sure I've mentioned on other videos. I know I have. So you can use this formula when you are working with your awareness of pattern interrupting, anything that you would like to shift. Now, I'll also say real quick, in your practice of awareness, you're also going to note patterns that serve you that you don't want to change. If you're really practicing awareness, you'll notice yourself do something and be like, oh, fucking shit, that's on autopilot. Okay, that's good. I'm thankful for that. Hell yeah, good shit. And take that moment to acknowledge that pattern and invoke a little bit of like, hell yeah, I'm doing good shit. This is self-talk. I need to do a video on self-talk, or I will. That shit is so fucking powerful the more that we do it. And I cannot stress that enough. With the thought category, an easy example that I'll often refer to is the word struggle. Now, the words that we say are the vessels for the energy that our brain and our central nervous system literally react to. That the 50 to 70 trillion cells that make up our body literally react to. It's not the words themselves, it's the energy behind it, right? So me saying something like, for instance, if I say, man, I'm really struggling today, okay, that's going to have a certain effect on someone who is speaking the English language, versus if we find someone like in China or something that's never spoken the English language and they say, man, I'm really struggling today, they're not going to have any reaction internally from it because they don't have any relation to the language. Small preface to help illuminate a pattern that, if you find, would be one to work to redirect, to acknowledge, allow, redirect, and offer gratitude for the experience of acknowledging, allowing, and redirecting the thing, or gratitude for something related to the thing. If you catch yourself either responding to someone or reflecting about your day and you think something like that, where you, man, I'm really struggling, or something, but you're in that state of awareness and you go, oh shit, okay, here's one of those unconscious patterns of framing that I would find benefit in working with and addressing. So that's all right that that's there. So we just acknowledged it, we allowed it, but I know that's not the truth. I know that's a conditioned perspective, and the more I feed that wolf, the more it fuels what I don't want. So what else can I say here? Man, you know what? It's been a challenging week, but I'm gonna make it through. I know I will, because I always do. And matter of fact, man, I'm thankful that I caught this pattern, because I know that each time I do, it increases my awareness, and I'm literally creating new neural pathways that are going to help me have a more happy, more fulfilling, more liberated future, more resilient way of being and feeling every day. So this is good shit, and granted, I'm going over, you don't have to do it that broad, okay? If you are having a conversation with someone and you're just out in public and you notice that you said, like, I've been struggling this week. Well, you know what? It's been a challenging week, man. It's been a challenging week, but I'm good. How are you? Right? So I didn't do a full fucking thing, but I did do a quick little redirect. And there's someone, well, why'd you change what you said? I'm just working with how I think about things. Anyhow, how are you doing, man? You just give it right back to them, right? But I'm just saying it doesn't have to always be the full scope of it, but when you can do it that way, that's beneficial, especially when it's a feeling that comes up to the surface in response to an external stimuli. That's a feeling that, historically speaking, you don't like and you would like to not have happen. These are great examples of, finding time to go take a walk in nature and really go into the space of acknowledging and allowing this feeling, bringing it back to the surface, letting it come through and process, but then also telling a new story and finding gratitude for the experience. That's just a quick breakdown of habits. Our habits, whatever they are, definitely have an effect, as I believe I mentioned on the previous video, on how challenging or how easy the road of deconstructing limiting beliefs and reconstructing limiting beliefs can be for an individual. So yeah, man, I think that's it. I will say one quick note. I got laundry going in the background, and the buzzer's gone off a few times. It might have made it to the microphone. It might not have made it to the microphone. I've noticed it, but it hasn't rattled me. It hasn't thrown me off. Like I'm still here doing the thing. Where a historical version of myself I would have like gotten frustrated and fucking shut the shit down and went down there and fucking slammed on the thing. You know what I mean? Like it's just bananas. So I say that to say, if you relate to anything I say, any of my content, no matter how wound tight you might be or whatever it is that's going on, man, it is totally possible for you to come out of that and liberate yourself. But it does take work. It's not what we think of as work. It does take patience, and it does take implementation. The rate of received benefit directly correlates with the rate of implementation of whatever principles and practices you find align with you the most. Anyhow, I hope this video has been helpful, and until next time. Just you white in Rewiring, just you white. You'll be sorry that your tears will be too light. Just you white in Rewiring, just you white. You'll be sorry that